All right, we're gonna get started. If everyone can find a seat. Great, can everyone hear me okay? Yay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Hans Lujan Torres. I am a researcher and curator based here at Concordia University. And I'm actually stepping in for our friend and convener, Maya Ray Oppenheimer, who's feeling a little under the weather. So Maya, if you're watching, we send you our best wishes and hopefully you're feeling better soon. Thank you all for joining us here for the last Conversations in Contemporary Art event of the season. And what a season it has been, with so many wonderful discussions addressing diverse practices and topics in contemporary art. Tonight's talk is another great one, with many folks coming together to make this invitation and evening with Siren happen. For those who are new, CiCA, as it is affectionately known, is based within the MMFA program in the Department of Studio Art here at Concordia. It has been running since 2012 with the mandate of bringing artists, curators, scholars, and educators with a variety of practices and perspectives to engage with students and faculty at Concordia, but also the broader Montreal arts community and further afield via Zoom. So welcome to those who are tuning in via Zoom, wherever you may be, and to those who are here, we want to acknowledge that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Ghanaian Gahaga are the caretakers of this land. Jojage, Montreal is a gathering place for many, including the Algonquin, whose name for it is Munyang, and other Indigenous nations with diverse communities. As co-host opening this event's proceedings, I do so with respect to the millennia of gatherings to trade ideas and relations that have taken place here in Jojage. So on the theme of co-hosting, I will quickly mention some of the background info on this evening and then go through the order of proceedings. So Siren Jung is a participant artist here in this year's upcoming MOMENTA Biennale, curated by Ji Yoon Han and her team. An invitation started growing to bring Siren to Jojage in advance and to bridge her presence with the artists and cultural workers in the city. In anticipation of MOMENTA, this was a route for CiCA to combine resources with the GEM Lab and the Leonard and Bina Art Gallery and MOMENTA. So I'm now going to hand over the mic to Marie Martrere, who's representing the GEM Lab. And then Marie will introduce Siren, and then Siren will take the spotlight. And then we're going to transition into a Q&A. And anyone can ask questions afterwards. Anyone on Zoom, please use the chat function to do so. And we'll wrap around 7:30 p.m. So I'll pass it over to Marie.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really a pleasure to see all of you during this end of the semester and also on Zoom. I'm Marie Martrere, and I'm a curator and a research assistant at the GEM Lab, which is hosting this event as part of a year-long seminar on digital aesthetics and politics in the age of streaming television. I'm also a PhD student in the Film Studies department here at Concordia. It's a real pleasure to have Siren join us today in Montreal, especially also for me because it's actually the first week that we met after working together on a project with Hyunjin Kim for a couple of years. And I'm just going to want to introduce a little bit her practice and maybe where you might have seen her work, and then we'll jump into the event. So Siren is an artist who works across visual art, film, and theater. Currently living in Seoul, she studied visual arts and feminist theory at Hwa Women's University in South Korea, as well as at the University of Leeds in the UK. Her interests lie in the seething desires of anonymous individuals that transform into resistance and politics. Her practice is grounded into her belief that through continuous re-examination of feminist queer methodology, an artist's practice that is both aesthetics and political is possible. Siren's work has grown through and been exhibited in major exhibitions across Asia and at numerous biennials and triennials in the last 10 years, including Brisbane, Guangzhou, Taipei, Shanghai, and more recently, the Korean Pavilion at the Venice Biennial in 2019. She also has received several awards for her work, including the Hermes Foundation Art Award, the CiCA Art Prize, and the Korea Artist Prize. And as Hans mentioned, we also very fortunate to have an exhibition of her work as part of the MOMENTA biennial opening in September that's curated by Jung. So during this event, siren will speak about some of her projects that explores notions of tradition, core memory, hegemonic powers, and disobedience. In particular, she will talk about her long research projects on the gender bending practices of the Yosung Theater. And before we begin, and I hand it over to Siren, we really want to thank everybody who made possible this event, especially Siren for coming all the way from Seoul for a week. Hans, Joshua Neves, Maya Ray Oppenheimer, Ji-Yoon Han, Audrey Genois, Michel Theriot, Karim Zippinger, Joshua Murphy, Guillaume Soor, Tegan Lenz, Pat Bonner, and Becky Holt. As you can see, it's really a group collective event that we're organizing. So with that, please join me in welcoming Sarah. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Siren. Actually, today I'm going to share my, long-term research called the Yosung project. So please let me start. It's okay? Oh, is it quite? So can I use? Okay. Yeah. Here is an image. More specifically, here is a black and white photo recording a moment in the past. This is a picture of a so-called simulated wedding ceremony featuring 여성극공 male law actor Kim Man-jo, who swayed the South Korean show business in the 1950s. Together with her big fan. Comparatively well known also to researchers and fans of the genre, this photo is vague as to its whereabouts. Okay.
Keep your hands free.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay, so this photo is vague as to its whereabouts now. According to my interview of Kim Man-jo in winter of 2008, a professor requested and borrowed this picture sometime, saying it was needed to research on 여성극극, but didn't return it. The picture didn't come back to its owner even at her death in August 2012. There's even after beginning research on 여성극극, there was a time when I paranoidly looked for physical materials like this picture. Because no official history book or archive on the jung existed, I believed any kind of trace could be an important historical material. Perceiving even things with the weakest connection as belonging to the category of materials, I devoted much energy to tracing them. I was convinced that obtaining more materials was the path to better research, and the sense that I've found, only I've seen, little known materials seems to guarantee great authority. Early on, Jacques Derrida called such an archival desire for total truth, but this desire came to loss in the end by always failing a fever. From 2008, when I began research on the jung, to the next 5 years or so, people from comparatively diverse fields compared to the past dove into this sphere of fascination called 여성국구. And those who sought to produce not only research papers, but also outcomes as artist creation, such as documentaries featuring films and cartoons increased too. 여성국구, who after a long hiatus visited a small community left with only a handful of elders and the enjoying energy even raised expectations of the revival of the jung. But at the same time, invisible competitiveness, strong tension among them, including lively of the desire to preoccupy research and materials, spread like a fever too. Because oral transmissions about unconfirmed past scenes always took up over half of interviews with the surviving first-generation actors, certain historical materials that would clearly support the elders' vague memories or embellished experiences were always desperately needed. In research based on oral transmission, whether or not the elders' memories indeed guaranteed historical fact was one to be doubted, and representational arts such as film, fine art, and narrative always produced anxiety before judgments regarding the presence or absence of historical meanings, which was likely to be the basis for representation. My guess is that for members of the 여성국구 community who have pursued only the identity of an actor all their lives, it would have been hard to perceive sundry items related to the genre and to themselves as historical materials, objects bearing important value that would be current only in the so-called intellectual field. Of course, though it was impossible to expect a systematic collection of materials driven from within the 여성국구 community, there sometimes were those who were vaguely aware that the past was history as well. However, because individual actors' lives were not easy either, after the decline of the jung, several materials that they had kept were not more important than the weight of life. Unable to withstand the time of painful lives, objects like script, performance posters, performance photos, and commemorative photos with colleagues or fans were discarded to a considerable degree or scattered and disappeared. Out of the fortunately extant materials, certain ones considered to have value as historical materials was used as references by researchers too, but often did not return to their owners. For this reason, or due indeed to the elders' excessive concern and suspicions, and moreover, a tendency for such records to be privatized without being perceived as public and historical assets, access to materials was often denied or blocked as well. Because it's only been some 70 years since 여성국구 was born and its history has been created, there is little possibility that photos left somewhere would have crumbled naturally and disintegrated, thus becoming completely extinct. In particular, because printed materials like photos, posters, leaflets, and scripts have the media characteristic of plurality, if someone made hard efforts to find them, it would certainly be possible to discover materials silently dormant in some owners' valued private storage. Indeed, often told about who had what materials, I always wanted to see and texture them myself. I gradually decided to stop my obsession with those physical materials. That is, I didn't want to be a pathicist buried in historical positivism. Let's go back to this single image. For a long time, the late Kumenjo repeatedly mentioned this fake wedding photo and the story surrounding it in many private and public interviews. It's because to her, who underwent 3 rather unmemorable heterosexual marriages and had the experience of bearing and raising 3 children, all with different last names, this simulated wedding ceremony was the only memorable event in her life. The fan who requested this photo shoot, too, was a common heterosexual housewife, wishing only to leave a memento reflecting her love for a star. She planned the very symbolic moment of a wedding ceremony. Also, at work was the advantage that, luckily, her husband's business happened to be a wedding hall. But this picture was left because, above all, that fans' honest request wasn't rejected. Male law actor Koo Meng-jo, a major star in the 여성국구 community then, instead of refusing, even went one step further, bringing along members of the theatrical troupe and assigning them the role of wedding guest and staging the wedding so that the photo would look all the more real. Though it may only have been a rather playful happening, by performing a wedding, they left an unforgettable memory between a star and a fan, and at the same time, a scene from an unforeseen same-sex wedding. Moreover, that the only wedding photo left to Koo Meng-jo, who underwent 3 heterosexual marriages in her life, but ones that failed repeatedly, was a moment in an albeit fake same-sex wedding is very meaningful. Here is photography valid as a mnemonics bringing the past as the truth? Or is this photo meaningless because it doesn't represent the truth? Perhaps, as Walter Benjamin said, does this photo still summon the past because the future lies in it very meaningfully? Do images like this fulfill their duties by being housed in archive of authority founded on positivistic history? How is indexing assigned to these possessions possible? What does this indexing aim at? Above all, how do images become history? Unable to obtain the actual picture, I came to obtain a rather unclear reproduced image of it after tracking the picture's whereabouts through many channels. And by digitally scanning it, I obtained a JPG file amounting to some 10 megabytes. It was a digital image consisting only of the information values of 0 and 1. With copyright or proprietary right lost, with the materiality of the photographic paper lost above all, and with the private memos and records that may have been left on the back of the picture, utterly unimaginable. Over several days, I sought to find out the truth held by this image, repeatedly and totally poring over the image and repeatedly magnifying or reducing it. Of course, the more I magnified the image, what became clearer were just countless square pixels or half-tone dots, which never produce meaning. Because I forcefully increased the resolution, this image lost sharpness a bit, and its original size became hard to guess. At least I came to secure a level of quality where the pixels weren't eyesores. And with its information values innumerably exchanged and converted into and with RGB and CMYK, the bitmap and the vector, the image came to transcend the diverse media and platforms. Often as a printed image, a moving image, a thumbnail, a half-tone dot, a rumor, an incident, art, and history. Its conformity to the purpose of a historical archive, even despite the digitalization and repeated reproduction of this image and repeated degradation, a value that must always be put first. If such a process is indispensable to the transition to digital archives, which undoubtedly are the major projects or museums and archives now, at which stage is the truth, the historical value of this image discovered and officialized. The strata of meanings and questioning surrounding this single image ceaselessly drove the 여성국국 project for over a decade. A momentary happening created by a male law actor in the genre who swayed an era and her fan, lost evidence and forgotten history, but could an extended image and its overlapping discordant or dynamism with queer imagination transports that past moment to the present effect in a breeze. Firmly taking root the moment I first faced this image, the project was a time of unceasingly questioning, probing, and failing at the possibility of reinterpreting and reconstructing that moment. Though that time was fulfilling, it was confusing too, like searching a wrongly constructed index. But it's also true that I was finally able to imagine other possibilities only in that confusion. So the 여성국국 project was accepting confusion itself and reconstructing another archive too. Having founded the Women's Traditional Korean Music Society, which could be seen as the nearly first women artist organization in the post-liberation space in 1948, Nokju Park thus wrote in 1974 while serializing the story of her life in a newspaper like this. Regrettably, the women's changguk, the flower in jail, the first work where they worked together, was actually ignored by the public. Though this was an adaptation of the pansori tale of Chunhyang, the most popular love play and a unique work from among the 5 repertories of Pansori, the audience was unable to accept a male character played by a female. Produced despite the failure of The Flower in Jail, The Sun and the Moon was performed in the following year, was a great success. Though a Korean adaptation of Giacomo Puccini's opera Turandot, this work was publicized with the rhetoric of a national opera. Western performance aesthetics experienced through Japan during the Japanese colonial era became a clue for the imagination regarding modern aesthetics, and this would have become a strategy for 여성국국, which steadily yearned for newness. Chuneng Im founded her own company in 1950 and performed a new work called The Golden Pig. The Golden Pig signaled the beginning of 여성국국 as a genre at the same time became a record hit. Moreover, it led Chuneng Im to be famed as the actual founder of the genre and the legendary male role actor. In the 1950s, 여성국국 began to win over the public. Theatrical troupes performed even while fleeing during the Korean War, which shows just how popular that genre was. Led by Chuneng Lim, her company lived astounding success in most of the work is staged from before the Korean War to a period of decline during the latter half of the 1960s. This served as a basis for the formation of countless 여성국국 performances and theatrical troupes, thus creating an age when the genre dominates popular culture. It is no exaggeration to say that at the time, in a situation where everything was in ruins due to the war, 여성국국 performances were the only culture and artistic performance most accessible to the populace. After the Korean War, 여성국국 set and reset records in the history of success in the South Korean show business that will never be repeated and left innumerable topics for conversation surrounding performances. However, it drastically went into a decline from the latter half of the 1960s, that it took a single performance genre, the short span of some 20 years to be born and to decline, to would be an unheard and old record in the history of the show business too. As causes of this decline, aspects such as the following have been commonly cited. The popular dissemination of more modern modes and spectacular drama, such as Hollywood film, theatrical troupes, oversights, failing to polish the system and the poster next generation actors, and the lack of the zeitgeist on the part of members of the 여성국국 community who, immersed only in acting, failed to catch up with the trend of the times. At this point, performance gender researcher Ji-hae Kim argues that economic losses due to patriarchy's gender division of labor must be added as a major cause. In other words, as males led the administrative and operational duties of theatrical troupes, such as marketing, publicity, and financial management, female actors, besides just going on stage, were unable to accumulate economic capital to sustain their performances. In addition, Kim strongly raised the suspicion that the military dictator regime's project of establishing traditional culture in the 1960s, 70s collude with male traditional Korean musicians, intentionally omitting 여성국국, which consisted only of women, so that jung would be unable to enter the sphere of traditional culture. Moreover, that women-only organization collapsed more swiftly than did other male-led performance organization and were removed from the possibility and chance to make a comeback every time prompts us to realize the need for analysis from a gender viewpoint in research on 여성국국. Since the 1980s,
아사녀, 아사다님, 용서하오, 아사녀여, 떠나는 내 가슴도 핏으로 여미는 듯
Since the 1980s, some rare attempts have been made to recover the authenticity held by 여성국국 in the past. Relying on the state cultural fund project, over 200 works have been produced to date, presenting insufficient yet meaningful performances as well. Since the 1990s, recreations such as research and books on 여성국국 have been produced, rarely but steadily. However, amid fervent moves dreaming of the revival of the jung, there have been increasingly many cases where first-generation actor can no longer go on stage for reasons such as old age and illness or die. In August 2012, Il Kemengjo passed away. Thus, none of the male lead actor from the first generation of 여성국국 performers is alive, except for Kyung-soo Kim, the male character, whose survivor and whereabouts have yet to be confirmed officially. Nowadays, the web cartoon have huge success among the young generation. The National Changguk Company made their new repertoire based on that cartoon. So that is cartoon, and the National Musical Theater made this piece based on that cartoon. And even, K-drama prepared to launch the new series based on the cartoon. So unfortunately, they have never claimed this gendered hierarchical history and how the first generation actors are bearing their lonely life. Anyway, now something happening in the popular culture in Korea with this 여성국국. And I'm going to have quick showing about similar gender bending theater in East Asia. I tried to research them in terms of transculturalism, but now it is stopped because of language limit. The Hong Kong handmade film is also gender bending.
梁山伯与祝英台，6大金马奖电影。
The Taiwanese opera is a similar.
到下里把人对枪了。
And also, this is the Japanese Takarazuka. It's still, very dynamic. And that is the Dakrajika school. That is still, get very famous. So they usually very, very hard training in their musical school. So it's still alive. Okay. Even in that the Second World War, the Japanese government using that theater for that encourage people to go to the war. Okay. Okay, it's the fan and stars meeting in front of the theater. Okay, so even I always confusing what is from where. So the Korean, Japan, and Taiwan. Even the gossip magazine and women's magazine deal with this the stars in their content. Okay, so in addition to the whereabouts of the disappearing earlier generations, next generations are absolutely in suspicion. The 여성국극 stage can be seen as nearly extinct. How then should we hear and see incomplete voices and performances that have been transmitted through the bodies of those who are still left in that place even after the extinction? The 여성국극 project is an art project as a kind of ethnographic research that analyzing the special performance genre of female theater that was born and declined amid the desire of a modern state after the liberation, seeks critically to deconstruct conventional idea like oppression that cast a shadow over gender concept and views of tradition and history. Meanwhile, it's also a project that seeks persistently to trace the lives of those who, by being left around an excluded and lost history, clearly existed but had to be forgotten. It's the task of ceaselessly refining a methodology of representation, not as a determination at good representation that seeks to make the objects more audible and visible, but as an attitude that affirms and respects the lives of beings who have already become distanced from the sphere of visibility in themselves. It's the task of putting distance from the apparently obvious goals of historical rehabilitation and visibility, questioning why those goals are obvious and performing that act of questioning. It's also an expression of the determination not to relinquish representation in the end, paradoxically by rejecting normative representation. Let me stop here. To separate performance off stage and masterclass represent first generation 여성국극 actor 영숙조's oral statement and male law training processes implemented by second generation actor Lee and her disciples respectively. These two performances were combined into one later, and with the addition and revision of directing stressing the genealogy of first to third generation male role actors, reenacted in 2013 in Seoul and in 2014 in Yokohama, respectively under the title of Off Stage / Masterclass.
그때는 공산이 공에 기억자만 붙어도 그냥 빵 할 때거든. 근데 여기가 인민공화국기가 해서 다 졸업사진에 기생아씨들 빨래, 바느질 이거 해주고 돈을 벌어서 나를 가르쳐줘. 두야 멋대로들 놀아보세요. 남자 몸을 이렇게 하면은 진짜 나도 남자 역할 많이 해봤잖아요. 가슴이 두근두근다. 짜릿하고 그런다. 그거 어쩔 수 없는 거예요. 흘러간 나의 인생 매여 불러도 아무 대답이 없이 모르는 저 흘러만 가네.
제 이름은 김용숙입니다. 저는 여성국 배우입니다만 사실 그러기엔 민망할 정도의 신입니다. 오랫동안 소리를 해왔고 몸이 아파 소리하는 것을 포기하게 되기 전까지.
어쩜? 여자가 들었었지? 응? 아, 이만큼 썼어 내가. 그럼 좀 더 울어라. 좀 징그럽게 하란 말이야. 살짝 여자를 탁 건드려주란 말이야. 어? 그렇지. 몸을 이렇게 뒤로 당겨 이렇게. 자, 이렇게. 저리 가거라. 저절로 가잖아. 자. 산하지민 깊은 사랑
This work covered the claim, the transmission process and expression of 여성국국 male role acting, now known to be discontinuous, still continue through diverse unofficial and horizontal occasions and stimuli, such as oral statements, emotions, memories, and mimicry, even apart from officially systemized vertical educational method. Here, the techniques of male role acting can differ according to each actor's analysis and understanding of a male role, and gender expressions as stereotype that hardly swerve from socially conventional idea can be something unique, not easily captured by a certain masculinity or femininity either. As a result, These actors' stages shake and provoke the belief that body and mind and sexual orientation, acts and expression are always integrated with the norms of gender very stably and normally. Meanwhile, Anomalous Fantasy is a documentary performance that brings together the voice of melancholy and anxious compassion from a male role actor who, as a member of the last generation of 여성국곡 performers, no longer has a ground to stand on, and the voices of a queer chorus who sing of and celebrating their existence in a reality full of politics of hate and exclusion. Both the real persons in this story and the main character of the performance, Eunjin Nam must understand the character of herself in a way that her actually existing self and herself as a character in the work match, and at the same time, she distances herself from both. She comes to think newly of and to rearrange herself every time through repeated performances on the stage, through dialogue with voices and narrativize their histories in their respective ways, and in addition, through intersections with social, political, and historical turns, large and small, that constitute this world. Actually, this piece was touring for Taipei and Yokohama and Goa in India, even in Kyoto. So because of the pandemic, actually the piece touring has to be stopped. So yeah, next one. This work begins with image of Dunguri, assemble her masculine expression as symbols of the paradoxical transmission of 여성국곡, unwelcomed and forgotten by both tradition and contemporaneity, and as a clue prompting viewers to imagine the genealogy of contemporary queer performance that highlights the extent of 4 contemporary queer performers. The work continues to image of Dunguri, who gradually turns into a male backstage through makeup and her own oral statement on male role acting. And they're followed by her performance of Song of Love and her sensitive dance moves performed facing empty audience seat, furtively appropriate the attitude of stereotypical male pursued by the traditional male dance. Barnicid stage and empty archives overlapping with the reenactment of something named tradition or norm, black gaps in history filled with the reminiscence and sighs of elders awaiting death. Such a work suggests that we take tenacious steps toward queer history that we have resolved to decode, texture, and summon however we can via image of the past. The work focuses on resembling performance by the 4 queer performers, which reaches us after image of Doo-Moo Lee, the performance and musical of the lesbian theater actor Lee, her, who has always presented unique and transgressive characters in a male-centered and gendered theater community, and drag king performer Ah Jang-min, who has struggled to create a drag culture and a drag community as feminist queer point of contact. And Ji-won-seo, who as the director of the disabled women's theater group Dancing Waste and an actor with disabilities, has created a very exceptional performance aesthetics. And electronic musician Kirara, who has actively introduced the sensation of dissonance and segmentation of the body experienced as a transgender person into musical forms. Their praxis vibrates between former challenges that flee from stable jung performances and anomalous performance by uncomfortable and strange bodies that is driven by their own bodily experiences, resummoning the history of 여성국국, which has nearly disappeared to the context of queer performance. Okay, this work is about aging of queer lifetime. During the terrible pandemic, too many online bullying against the queer community is increasing day after day. Especially many transgender friends commit suicide. Me and my producer thought that we have to provide something political with art practice. We asked Korean first openly transgender novelist Kim Bi to write a script about aging. Then I direct this piece. The work is obviously the theater play, but also our political statement against Korean society at the same time. For a long time, performance art has repeatedly rejected and problematized the concept of the stable integrity and normality demanded of the body on the aesthetics and political levels. The basis of Korea's pansori tradition that 여성국국 has adhered to the ontological principle of oral transmission extends its meaning to a more corporeal and performative level in this work, and by flowing, stopping, being deferred, or being overlapped among or with moving bodies, attempt a shift to the methodology of mutual transmission among queer bodies. My work, therefore, is an attempt repeatedly to evoke the queer turn in artistic praxis by newly assembling moments at which performing as queering is sensed and at the same time is a product of the ardent desire to secure a political basis for queer aesthetics, which rushes outside official history. Who remember what? Is representation appropriate as others' mnemonics? When he said to remember, one must imagine, Giorgio Didi Weberman was arguing that the task of broadening the place of memory that must be imagined in order to understand the dilemma of image, which are impossible but necessary, or the duty of representation that, in spite of all, needs to be thought ethically. He writes that to imagine in spite of all is to demand a difficult ethics of the image. How could a certain queer praxis that seeks to reenact beings with unceasing determination at this destabilization explain those queer beings' ardent desire to write history, which seeks tenaciously to remember the sensation of the body's impossible and uncertain yet extant? Empty archives left with only an image of deprivation, the impossible representation of an absent history, the inappropriate desire of discordant bodies, refused statements and rejected declarations, dangerous oppose on instability. How indeed can all such paradoxical existence and queer determination, where only subversive sensation probe life on boundaries, be described categorically? The past 15-year journey of the 여성국구 project is wholly indebted to the non-verbal performance of artistic praxis and to the displacive imagination of queer aesthetics. Thank you for your engaging.
Hello? Siren, thank you so much for that presentation. My mind is racing right now with so many ideas and thoughts. You were so generous with everything you shared. I'm going to give everyone 4 minutes to think about some questions that you might want to ask. Anyone on Zoom, please write them in the chat and we'll ask them in a couple of minutes. Yeah, I was like taking notes throughout your presentation, and there's so many things to touch on, like truth and separation in photography, or collective and generational memory, the construct of masculinity from a female and queer gaze. But throughout, I kept thinking about this book by queer theorist Steketich called The Archive of Feeling. And in that book, one thing that I mentioned, and Steketich talks about the archive, or how artists view the archive differently than, let's say, archivists or historians. And she says that the archive is seen from an artist's perspective more as a process than a fixed object that opens up possibility to do different things. And yeah, in looking at the images and also the very last moments of everything you do, there's definitely feelings, and it gives you a different sort of, there's emotions in those images alone. But then in thinking back to all of those, the video clips that you shared with us, there's so much joy and humor in, you know, those presentations. So I wanted to ask you if you can maybe speak a little bit more about your own experiences and feelings and emotions that you feel or felt when you were going through the archive, and what that sort of inspired.
So actually, you know, I already share many things about this, but to be honest, you know, at first time I was totally, you know, captured by that archive and by that their, you know, oral testimonies. Yeah. So yeah, still I'm really falling in love with that, yeah, everything in that community. Yeah, and also I really learned from their attitude and their thoughts actually, you know, in the Korean society, many people just really follow the newer things and or the capitalistic things, and it's a very speedy society. But that the old grandmother, they are really elders, are really slowly think and slowly speaking their, you know, their thought. So that is also some kind of, you know, inspiring to make some different type of aesthetic to me as artist.
So it's interesting. We're just not getting the Q&A questions very well. Just need to can you bring up the audio options again?
Here.
Yes. Test 1, 2. It's picking it up from there. Okay, it's not great. I don't know why, but it won't recognize. So we'll stick with that. It's not as good, but at least they can hear some of it. No, it's picking it up from the laptop. Oh, let's see. I don't know why the laptop won't recognize the incoming audio. Oh, well, that's-
So we don't have any solution.
I think it's working, but very not.
Not that so good. Okay.
I'm letting you guys get first then.
Okay.
Okay, are we done? Do you want to continue on your question? So for the interruption?
Yeah, well, maybe I can shorten two things. And Siren, maybe you can comment on that, but at some point you said like you were interested in questioning what a good representation might be, or it is not about a good representation, and I think that like is really very strong as a statement, and you see how you work with mediation. I really appreciated how you underline like the importance of formats, for example, at the beginning, like how this image, like the original, is forever lost, and we're always having to deal with copies or scans or deferred versions of that image. So maybe if you want to comment on that question of there is no good representation on the one hand, and I'll do the second part if that's okay, because it's connected, is that so you began with this photo, and in your presentation, like the introduction to Yasongukut came later, and what I hear is that the whole Yasongukut project is not about reconstituting Yasongukut as a traditional practice, but instead taking the process of that research, and that's where maybe it connects with the question about like how to make an archive as an artist, like researching the Yasongukut project leads you to something else. And maybe an idea that came to my mind is that you started with this archive fever, you talked about Yasongukut, but then it seems that you decided to follow the actors instead of the Yasongukut as a theatrical genre per se, and to follow the people and the communities. So maybe taking a kind of side curve to the theatrical genre per se, which historians have researched, but as an artist, you follow this other path. And going back to the first question, the first aspect, maybe it's like about not having a good, like we're not looking for a good representation of Yasongukut, but maybe
yeah, it's difficult, but I try to. You know, as an artist, and also I'm really studying. I'm really studying at academia, like, you know, from undergraduate to PhD. So we always very obsessed by how we do good representation. But usually we think like, you know, there is a minority and there is an invisible thing. We can make this visible, or we can make this really strengthen that kind of minority and invisible thing. But I want to think, you know, the good representation is not that kind of process. The good representation is just how, you know, the invisible feels, how we can reread and interpret that invisible field. So not that kind of, you know, it's also battery is gone. So strategically, I try to make some theme not to be visible and not to be gorgeous, just try to make some kind of different type of questioning, like, you know, the visual thing is really good for visual art, that kind of thing. So even, you know, I try to make people to be not see clear, you know, shape and clear thing. So and also I sometimes put more like a meaningless thing in that piece. So that kind of strategy is kind of my, you know, methodology. So as I said, like, you know, paradoxically, that is the desire to representation, but not doing, you know, really good, representation. I don't know. Yeah, it makes sense or not.
I think maybe also one thing that struck me in terms of the tension is that there are all these figures that are so glamorous, like the historical images when you see the poses, and when you compare Takarazuka and Taiwanese theater and Korean Yasongguk, you see that there are those fixed poses that are kind of repeating across cultures, and on the one hand there are those very recognizable images, and on the other with your immersive performance by flash, velocity, and noise, we cannot even grasp the image. So
right, yeah.
Arch between what we can like label directly as what is speaking.
And I believe actually, you know, the life of people and their real, you know, life bring many kind of thing, like, you know, emotion and sense, and I mean the actually, you know, unwritten things we can sense. So I believe that kind of thing. So that's why I try to make so many interviews with the real persons.
I wanted to ask, because you mentioned that Rosamund started in this post-colonial phase right after the Japanese occupation ended. So I wanted to ask how Rosamund might have maybe interacted with the cultural inheritances or maybe the traumas of that kind of period, and I guess what did it inherit, maybe forcibly inherit from Japan and Japanese culture?
I don't really think like it's an inherit. But you know, the people during the Japanese occupation, the people can get some sense about very new kind of aesthetics and new kind of art form. So the Takarazuka started from very early of 19th century, 18th century, right? No, 20th century. Yeah, 2019. Yeah. So so at the moment, you know, modernization is just coming up to everywhere in especially in Asian continent. So many people really want to that kind of new things and some different type of very modernized art form. So we have pansori. The pansori is a very, very, you know, pre-modern form. So one person singing drama and one person makes some different characters. But for that, the modernized and westernized musical like Changguk, so many people come together on the stage is really want to look like Western. So that kind of situation in that the period, I think, you know, the Japanese things and Korean things make some kind of inter-referentially reactive to each other. And also during that modernization, so many art forms are really male-oriented, and that is really heavy and gets some kind of elitism. So many women really want to make their own story in the art form. So so that is kind of complicated phenomenon. Not really, you know, Japan give something to Korean or Korean give something to Japan. Not that kind of thing, I think. And I forgot the whole whole question. Okay.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I was a bit hesitant to ask this question. It's slightly question, but I still want to ask. I found it very interesting when you talk about the way you talk about contact and the male role female actors as well. Because I remember like the storybook you were like talking about how the storybook is because they actually embody both male and female characters in their singing and performances. He started to modernize that, to localize the modern sense. He started to kind of perform traditional music in drag outfits, but at this end, I'm noticing that there's a lot of these hybridities of musical forms and performativity in Korean and also in other Pan-Asian contemporary music bands as well. But I did notice that they are all coming from a male perspective. Like, I mean, in Korea, Yoon was, I believe he was the one who first started, but he's also coming from a very privileged family within that field too. So I'm just wondering, what are the, like, is there any difference in the way Yeosangkuk or other women performers in Korea or other parts in Asia that kind of strategizes their performance identity in terms of gender that differs to male performers performing both male and female actors? I think that's a little question by them.
So you mean in this the nowadays?
Yes, I guess so. Because I'm just curious how that kind of, if Moon and other people kind of translated that. But I think that was just translation was somewhat acceptable because of this male Identity, since male identity, so I don't know, like maybe there was like a different struggle in strategizing a performative identity on stage for 여성국들 or other female artists in the contemporary scene.
So you mean in traditional musical scene?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
Because you know, the Korean society is really, really, you know, conservative and very, you know, firm idea we have actually. So in the traditional musical scene is not unbelievably conservative. So you said Lee Hee-moon.
Yes.
Yeah. Lee Hee-moon is a really, you know, special person. It's a very, very old person in that contemporary scene, but he can work in the contemporary scene and in the traditional scene at the same time. So he can make his character like that kind of things. But usually, you know, traditionally in the Korean traditional musical scene, they don't really allow that kind of performing. So the Lee Hee-moon is one old thing. And also the Deunguri, yeah, I already work with. The Deunguri is another, yeah, very old case, I think. And also, you know, even in the contemporary music scene, I showed Kirara. She's the transgender electronic musician. She is also very old. So she cannot really want to show up as a transgender person in the public. Okay. And also, I don't really know about musical scene actually. But you know, in contemporary art scene, we are more open. Okay.
One more question. Yeah. Thank you for that presentation. My question is focusing on the exhibition strategy, where because in the gallery context, I understand that you are exhibiting reflections of the or documentations of the performances that you have directed with the living pictures. And in that way, I kind of thought about your way of working or interacting with this Good as a generating another archive or reinterpretation of the archive or reinterpretation of the genre. And also this idea of like the archives performing the space. So I just want to sort of hear about your thoughts on that, or your sort of what kind of process that you go through as you design exhibitions or conceive how to interpret these performances or into like a visual form. So that would be interesting.
Still now, you know, I usually identify with video artists, not the performance artists. But actually, you know, during that research, so that peoples are deeply identify with stage performer, not the film performer and not the drama star. So they really want to make their gesture and attitude on the stage. So at that time, you know, they make me to change my identity like, you know, performance artist. So I have to study again about performance. And because of the people really want to make their own stage. So I take that role, yeah, as artists, as a co-worker with them, then I finally, making that kind of piece. But still now, I'm really want to, I really want to be alone in my studio. Not, I'm very introvert person, so I don't really, to be honest, I don't really like that kind of collaboration and that kind of huge scale of, piece. So, but it's a kind of negotiation, and also my people, what do my people want to be, or what do my people work with? So that always changing my, even, my identity and my situation, even my standing point, and sometimes even my, political situation. For example, that old lady really supports that right wing. So sometimes, I have a really big struggle with this kind of political situation, but I try to make some different standing points working with them. Yeah, so I don't really think the artist is not that form person. Artist is not that kind of, how can I say? Yeah, so I'm always very performative, actually. Yeah, that is my learning from them. Okay, is it?
Maybe the next one more. Yeah.
I just want to read a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Siren, so much for the presentation. There was an point in your talk where you mentioned the potential of comparative analysis of the East Indian context, which made me think of inter-Indian cross-cultural influences. But more importantly, in this context, possible network of reports for non-normative performance practices. Are there these inter-Asian networks? Are they covered or others when and where? And maybe even in a much more inter-cross-disciplinary way across contemporary art, for example.
So what is the exact question?
Is there possible networks of support for non-normative performance practices?
Inter-Asian. Yeah, maybe we can, but but as I said, 2000 around 16 and 17, I actually researched the Japanese Takarazuka, staying in Takarazuka city, but it's really blocked to researchers, and also, the Japanese language is kind of, it's totally different from, the Korean language. So I don't really take some even, easy information from their community. So so many people really think about, the Asian network and Asian inter something, can be good and can be, bigger than the Western things. But I don't really take some possibility from the situation. But still I'm thinking about how I try to make some kind of theoretical or performative knowledge from that network and that what is the I think the better word than network. I don't know. But anyway. Yeah, but yeah, for me it's failed, but yeah, somebody can do that.
Well, wrapping up, thank you again to Sarah for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And yeah, everyone, thank you again to Marie and to you from MOMENTA and the Gem Lab, and our friends at the Leonard Gallery for making this happen. I want to send our well wishes to Maya, who hopefully is feeling better. Thank you to the MLP program and to Joshua Artec, and for you for joining us. Thank you. This is our last event of CiCA, so we'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take a breather.